Namaskar. A warm welcome to World News and Indian Perspective on All India Radio. This is R.S. Raghu and with me is Aditi Lumba bringing glimpses of the major developments of the day from across the globe. Over the next half an hour, we shall bring you the latest from the world of politics, economy, sports, entertainment and more. The headlines. Prime Minister Narendra Modi reshapes country's foreign policy that has national interests at its core, says External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar. India calls for a united, coordinated and unified response to international terrorism. Election Commission to host a virtual meet of the Asian Regional Forum in New Delhi on Thursday. Bangladesh warns developing countries from taking loans through the Belt and Road Initiative BRI of China. Donald Trump appears for questioning under oath on Wednesday in the New York Attorney General's long-running civil investigation. Russia successfully launched an Iranian satellite into orbit amid U.S. concerns over its planned purpose. U.S. President Joe Biden endorses Finland and Sweden's accession to Nato. In Kenya, preliminary results from presidential election shows a tight race between the two main candidates vying to replace outgoing President Uhuru Kenyatta. And 23 times Grand Slam champion Serena Williams announces retirement from professional tennis. External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar has said Prime Minister Narendra Modi has reshaped the country's foreign policy that has national interest at its core, but in a manner that has harmonized with global good. Participating as the chief guest at a discussion on a book titled Modi at 20, Dreams Meet Delivery at the English and Foreign Languages University EFLU campus in Hyderabad, Dr. Jaishankar said the foreign policy is the world outlook of a new India, stating that Mr. Modi looms large on the world stage. The minister said his policies and initiatives have had their impact. The minister stated that the Prime Minister's language, metaphors, appearance, mannerisms and habit they define a persona that the world has come to recognize. Elaborating on the country's foreign policy, Dr. Jaishankar stated that a large element of this is also the manner in which the Prime Minister carries himself. Justice L. Narasimha Reddy said, Mr. Modi's capable handling of COVID pandemic has changed the world perspective of India. EFLU Vice Chancellor Professor E. Suresh Kumar highlighted some key excerpts from the articles written by Union Home Minister Amit Shah, Dr. Jaishankar and the National Security Advisor Ajit Doval. India has called for a united, coordinated and unified response to international terrorism. Speaking at the UNSC session on threats to international peace and security caused by terrorists act, India's permanent representative to the United Nations, Ambassador Ruchira Kamboj, said that terrorist threats are on the rise globally. Ms. Ruchira Kamboj said it is most regrettable that genuine and evidence-based listing proposals pertaining to some of the most notorious terrorists in the world are being placed on hold. She stated that the members should refrain from labeling terrorism based on motivations which will only allow opportunistic forces to provide justifications for certain terror activities based on their convenience.
The practice of placing holds and blocks on listing requests without giving any justification must end. It is most regrettable that genuine and evidence-based listing proposals pertaining to some of the most notorious terrorists in the world are being placed on hold. Double standards and continuing politicization have rendered the credibility of the sanctions regime at an all-time low. We do hope that all members of the Council can pronounce together in one voice sooner rather than later when it comes to this collective fight against international terrorism.
The Election Commission will be hosting a virtual meet of the Asian Regional Forum in New Delhi on Thursday. This regional forum will deliberate on the theme making our elections inclusive, accessible and participative, and is precursor to the Global Summit for Democracy to be hosted by the National Electoral Institute of Mexico in the coming month. The Global Summit and the Regional Forum meet aim at generating synergy amongst international organizations, electoral bodies from the world, and to promote intellectual and institutional mobilization to strengthen electoral democracy in the world. Chief Election Commissioner Rajiv Kumar and Election Commissioner Anup Chandra Pandey will preside over the Asian Regional Forum meet. It will have participation from election management bodies of Mexico, Mauritius, Philippines, Nepal, Uzbekistan, Maldives and representatives from Association of World Election Bodies and International Foundation for Electoral Systems. The first session is on inclusive elections, enhancing participation of youth, gender and citizens in remote areas, which will be co-chaired by the Chief Election Commissioner from Mauritius and Nepal. The second session will be on accessible elections, enhancing participation of persons with disabilities and senior citizens. In today's Hotspot section, we bring you a discussion on Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav series, discussion on Indian foreign policy, charting a new course. In conversations are Anil Kumar Trigunyat, former ambassador, and Simran Sodhi, journalist.
Today we are discussing India's foreign policy as we celebrate 75 years of India's independence. We have also seen Indian foreign policy evolve over the years, and especially in the last 10 years or so, we have seen a foreign policy which is much more aggressive and an effective foreign policy which has shifted New Delhi away from its old strategy of strict non-alignment, and this has paved the way for stronger ties with great and middle-sized powers globally. Ambassador Trigunyat, if you take a quick look at how the Indian foreign policy has evolved, especially in the last 10 years, what would your quick analysis be?
Well, I think that in the last 10 years, definitely the foreign policy has become far more robust, resilient, and result-oriented. That is essentially the difference, because today we have relationships with nearly all the countries. At the same time, we are continuing to maintain our principled stand in the international affairs or on the international issues. India has taken several leads, and you mentioned about the time of independence. We had no choice but to remain non-aligned and to fight for the cause of the world. Basically, the countries and the people who were subjugated to colonialism. So India took the lead at that time when it was very weak. It needed assistance from all sides in order to strengthen its industrial development, economic development, and fight poverty, hunger, and other things. So the challenges have remained even now, but millions and millions of people have come out of poverty. India's stance in the global affairs has increased significantly. But then there is always, you have to shift gears in the foreign policy, even if the car remains the same, or for that matter, your road remains the same. But definitely the style, the contact, the personal connect that Prime Minister Modi, especially in the last 10 years, has brought about is extremely important for in this very complicated times, especially when the world is going through a major churn and we see there are global challenges that are confronting everyone. So at this time, India has shown the path of peace and development and leadership, whether it is in the International Solar Alliance, whether it is Coalition for Disaster Resilience, vaccine diplomacy, and then we can talk about so many other things that have happened.
Mr. Trigunyat, one of the major shifts that we see in these last 10-15 years has been the strategic shift from a very close relationship with Russia, which we still maintain, to a relationship with the United States. And India today has also the strong Indo-Pacific strategy. This is an effort to contain China, of course. But do you feel that this strategic shift which we have seen of late, while on one hand India is maintaining its ties with Russia, which is an old traditional friend, India has also moved forward and embraced this strategic relationship with the United States. And we see this relationship also gaining strength almost every year that we observe the foreign policy.
Yeah, I mean, this is precisely when I said that it is fundamental tenets remain. That means we want friendship with everyone. And the world has also moved along quite a bit. There are now 192 countries in the United Nations compared to 50, 60 that used to be there at the time. But India even led from the front even in the times when we were significantly weaker. But today what has happened is that to wade through these complicated geopolitical scenario requires a very adept handling, which the Indian leadership has been able to do. So what you mentioned about Indo-Pacific, because China at that time was not such a big threat, even though I think Pandit Nehru's biggest regret was misunderstanding China, and we suffered a great deal in 1962. But that happened to be an eye-opening for India. And subsequently, you can see India was very decisive in various wars that ensued and were inflicted upon us. But at the same time, the Indo-Pacific now today, China's rise is rather malign in a way, if one can say that. I use that word because it is hegemonistic. It is aggressing into the various territories, and we have the dispute with them now, the Galwan incident and others. They keep on happening, and the China remains somewhat defiant to the global architecture and the global system. So this will remain our major challenge, even though India does not, as Prime Minister Modi said at the Shangri-La dialogue, does not believe in containment of China, would rather see an inclusive Indo-Pacific in which there is a free and open. So this is going to be a new theater of competition. The relationship with Russia remains strong, despite the fact that Russia may have weakened significantly, but our interdependencies have increased, and India takes a position from a principled perspective. As far as even the Russia-Ukraine war is concerned, it was not really much to do with what is our economic or defense engagement with the countries. It is for peace. But at the same time, with the United States, we have grown from strength to strength in our relationship without falling into the trap of this alliance architecture.
Mr. Trungnath, as you pointed about China, and this we have seen and we've discussed this before, that one sees a very aggressive rise of China, which is alarming for the world order as it is. Do you feel that of late the groupings that we have had, for example, the Quad which has come, and you have other groupings, now we have the West Asia Quad. Do you feel that groupings like this also give India an additional global voice to talk about its concerns, whether it is regarding China or it is regarding other issues?
Well, of course, you have to have partners in order to contend any malignant growth. Because in order to even exert pressure on China, you need partners who think like you, and democracies. So that's the reason the Quad has come into being. It is not a security partnership in that sense of the term, even though its name is Quadrilateral Security Arrangement or whatever. But at the same time, let us see that how do you communicate with China, and how do you confront China, and how do you convince China to essentially follow the international order. The problem with the superpowers is, whether it's United States, China or Russia, is that they prefer to take a unilateral path. And that unilateralism causes a major challenge for a country like India, which in its own right is a regional power and aiming to become a global power, at least through its soft power diplomacy. And so what we are seeing is that India has to protect itself, defend itself, grow simultaneously. But at the same time, it has to be a part of various multilateral architectures. You mentioned Quad, there's the BRICS, in which we are part with Russia and China. There is Shanghai Cooperation Organization. Again, Russia and China are there, and several regional powers. Then we have RIC, Russia, India, China. All these organizations are going strong. What does it say? It says that India believes that it can work with several countries in our region, and it can continue to serve its national interest in that perspective. And that's what I said, that Prime Minister Modi and Dr. S. Jaishankar, and before that, late Srimati Sushma Swaraj, I think they have done an amazing job in this, like India's Neighborhood First policy, India's Act West policy. You mentioned about the West Asian Quad, I2, U2 as it is called now. Now that is a kind of a change that is taking place in the Middle East. There are new equations that are emerging.
Mr. Trungnath, one relationship, the India-Israel relationship, which we have seen, it's really changed the nature of the relationship in the last 10, 15 years. We've seen an open embrace of Israel, which we didn't see for a very long time. Would you say that this has been one of the important changes that we have seen in the Indian foreign policy in the last 10 years or so?
In 1992, when we had full recognition and diplomatic ties with Israel, at that time I was dealing with that desk. And we had taken that step. And now when I see the relationship between India and Israel growing, it's definitely 25, 27 years have been a great success. Success is we have become strategic partners, we are technology partners, and Israel has excelled itself. But India has not hesitated to talk about the Palestinian issue. It has continued to propagate the two-state solution and dialogue between the two sides, and efforts are being made in that direction. India continues to provide a lot of assistance to the Palestinians. At the same time, we have de-hyphenated that policy. So that's definitely a change. That our relationship with Israel stands on its own, and our relationship with Palestine stands on its own. And this has been accepted by both Israel and the Palestinians. Likewise, we continue to maintain our relationship with Iran. At the same time, we have great relationship with Saudi Arabia, with other GCC countries, and the UAE. So there are two reasons for this. One is the kind of personalized diplomacy in which Prime Minister Modi has really engaged. And I admire that because he is able to communicate with the leaders at the personal level. And that's precisely what has happened. And that has given you the kind of heft which we did not have earlier vis-a-vis Pakistan. Today, when Balakot happens or Article 370 happens, these countries recognize that these are India's right positions that have taken. This has not happened before. So there is definitely a great change in this regard. Even on the multilateral front, climate change, Solar Alliance, and other initiatives. And top it all is our vaccine diplomacy, vaccine Maitri as it is called, during the pandemic. I mean, there's the biggest challenge, and India provided capacity building assistance. That is what makes India different from the rest of the world.
And in the coming days, we will continue our discussions on India's foreign policies. With these comments, we bring today's discussion to an end. Thank you.
Thank you.
This is All India Radio giving you the news. For quick news updates round the clock, follow us on Twitter at AIR News Alerts. Welcome back to World News. Bangladesh Finance Minister A.H.M. Mustafa Kamal has warned the developing countries from taking loans through the Belt and Road Initiative BRI of China. In an interview to the Financial Times FT, Finance Minister Mustafa Kamal said that the developing countries must think twice before taking BRI loans, keeping in mind the global inflation and slowing growth which add to the indebted emerging economies. Minister Kamal also suggested that China should evaluate the loans more rigorously as the poorer countries risk falling into debt trap due to wrong decisions about taking debt. In this context, he pointed out the case of Sri Lanka, whose economic crisis was exacerbated due to infrastructure projects funded by Chinese debt which failed to generate adequate returns. Referring to BRI projects taken up without rigorous decision-making, he said that everybody is blaming China. China cannot disagree. It is their responsibility. Finance Minister Kamal said that Bangladesh has sought a loan of $1.5 billion as the first installment of support out of the total package of $4.5 billion. The funding requirement included the climate change resilience projects and budgetary support. However, the IMF has not yet decided upon the quantum of loan it will provide to Bangladesh. Further, Bangladesh is seeking $4 billion more from World Bank, Asian Development Bank ADB, Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank AIIB, and Japan International Cooperation Agency JICA, said the minister. The statement of Finance Minister Kamal comes in the backdrop of the visit of Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi to Dhaka on August 6th to 7th. Prior to his visit, Bangladesh Foreign Secretary Masood bin Momen has said that Bangladesh is not negotiating any fresh loan from China. Donald Trump was being questioned under oath on Wednesday in New York. Attorney General's long-running civil investigation into his business dealings as a flurry of legal activity surrounds the former president. Trump's testimony comes just days after FBI agents searched his Mar-a-Lago estate in Florida as part of an unrelated federal probe into whether he took classified records when he left the White House. He arrived at the New York Attorney General's office shortly before 9 a.m. in a multi-vehicle motorcade. As he left Trump Tower in New York City for the short ride downtown, he waved to reporters assembled outside but did not comment. The civil investigation led by State Attorney General Letitia James involved allegation that Trump's company, the Trump Organization, misstated the value of prized assets like golf courses and skyscrapers, misleading lenders and tax authorities.
Russia successfully launched an Iranian satellite into orbit amid U.S. concerns over its planned purpose. The satellite, called Kayam, was launched from the Russian-leased Baikonur launch facility in Kazakhstan. Iran has said that it will be used for environmental monitoring and will remain under Tehran's control. Last week, U.S. officials told the Washington Post that they fear the satellite could be used by Moscow to spy on troop movements in Ukraine. Russia has struggled to achieve military objectives in Ukraine, and officials allege that Moscow's space agency Roscosmos told Tehran that it planned to maintain control over the satellite for several months or longer to assist with its war effort. U.S. President Joe Biden has signed documents endorsing Finland and Sweden's accession to Nato alliance. Celebrating the U.S. decision to ratify both the countries, President Biden said their alliance is closer than ever, it is more united than ever, and after Finland and Sweden join, they will be stronger than ever. Sweden and Finland applied for NATO membership in response to Russia's military actions in Ukraine. Moscow has repeatedly warned both countries against joining the alliance. Last week, the Senate voted 95-1 to ratify the entrance of Finland and Sweden into the world's most powerful military alliance. Both Finland and Sweden already meet many of the requirements to be NATO members. NATO's 30 allies signed the accession protocol for Sweden and Finland last month, allowing them to join the nuclear-armed alliance once all member states ratify the decision.
In Kenya, preliminary results from presidential election showed a tight race between the two main candidates vying to replace outgoing President Uhuru Kenyatta. The Kenyan Election Commission, the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission (IEBC), posted images of more than 90% of election result forms from a total of 46,663 polling stations. Meanwhile, for now, the Commission is now only posting pictures, not numbers. Only 2 constituency-level results are available on the Commission's website. However, the final result from the IEBC is expected in days, although legally it has up to a week. According to media reports, the frontrunners, Deputy President William Ruto and veteran opposition leader Raila Odinga were neck and neck with 1.2 million votes each. Kenyans voted for a new president on Tuesday against a backdrop of economic hardship and growing disenchantment with the political elite, with voting largely peaceful but producing low turnout in some areas. The country is hoping for an orderly transition of power after almost a decade under two-term President Uhuru Kenyatta, but concerns about vote rigging linger after past election disputes triggered deadly unrest. Yesterday's election is an important test for stability in East Africa's biggest economy after 2 of its 3 last elections were marred by violence following disputes over accusations of rigging. U.S. State Department has announced the imposition of restrictions on 100 Belarusian officials. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken said the State Department has sanctioned 2 high-ranking Belarusian officials for involvement in gross violation of human rights, namely the arbitrary detention of peaceful protesters. He further said it will move to impose visa restrictions on 100 regime officials and their affiliates for their involvement in undermining or injuring democratic institutions or impeding the transition to democracy. The measures were announced on the second anniversary of the disputed election in Belarus, in which longtime strongman leader Alexander Lukashenko claimed victory. It sparked massive protests throughout the country. U.S. has announced restrictions over visa issuance to over 100 persons, including officials of Belarusian President Lukashenko. The list includes persons holding senior positions in Lukashenko's administration, the Interior Ministry, the State Security Committee (KGB), the Central Election Commission, the Prosecutor General's Office, the Main Department of the Investigative Committee, the Ministry of Transport and Communications, the Main Department for Combating Organized Crime and Corruption, the Air Force, and the Air Defense Forces.
Greek authorities say a big search and rescue operation has been launched east of the islands of Karpathos after a boat reportedly carrying dozens of migrants and refugees sank overnight. The Coast Guard said on Wednesday that 29 people, all men, had been rescued from the sea 33 nautical miles east-southeast of Karpathos, a southeastern island between Rhodes and Crete. Those rescued were from Afghanistan, Iraq and Iran and told authorities there had been about 60 to 80 people on board the vessel when it went down, the Coast Guard said. Those rescued said the boat had set sail from Antalya area on the southern Turkish coast and was aiming for Italy when it ran into trouble during the night. The military-led government in Guinea has issued a decree dissolving the country's leading opposition movement when it accuses of using violence during what it calls banned demonstrations. The National Front of the Defence of the Constitution, or FNDC, is an alliance of political parties, trade unions and civil society groups. It led protests which prompted the overthrow of the former president, Alpha Condé, in a coup last year. It seems that authorities in Guinea are worried about the possibility of the protests gaining momentum. The FNDC has called for countrywide demonstrations next week at a time when some Guineans want the military to speed up to return to civilian rule.
A third fuel tank has been consumed by flames at a fuel depot in Cuba. The site, located near the city of Matanzas, has been on fire since lightning struck the area during a storm on Friday. Cuban officials say one firefighter has died and dozens of people have been injured by the blaze. Local authorities have warned nearby residents to wear face masks when outside and avoid rain as it may contain toxic substances. And now a report from the business desk.
The Sensex fell 36 points to finish at 58,817, while Nifty added 10 points to close at 17,535. At the global stock markets, global stocks tumbled while major currencies held steady as investors were reluctant to place bets ahead of the release of US inflation data. Investors waited for inflation data as it could point to Federal Reserve's appetite for more aggressive rate increases. Asian share markets fell except Singapore's Straits Times, which ended 0.5% up. Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index plunged 2% and South Korea's Kospi declined 0.9%. Japan's Nikkei 225 lost 0.7% and China's Shanghai Composite Index fell 0.5%. European shares were up but trading in a narrow range in intraday trade. Oil prices fell after industry data showed US crude inventories unexpectedly rose last week, signaling a potential hiccup in demand. Brent crude was trading at $94.95 per barrel, while WTI crude was at $89.30 per barrel. Gold was trading at 52,240 rupees per 10 grams at the multi-commodity exchange for October contracts. Silver was trading at 58,690 rupees per kilogram for September contracts when reports last came in. And in the forex market, the rupee appreciated 14 paise against the US dollar. The domestic currency closed at 79 rupees and 52 paise against the American unit. V. Ravi Kumar for World News All India Radio.
American legend Serena Williams, winner of 23 Grand Slam titles, has announced her retirement from professional tennis. While announcing her retirement in an article for Vogue magazine, the 40-year-old tennis star described her intention to finish her playing career as an evolution away from tennis. She explained that one of her biggest reasons for retirement is her intention to further expand her family. Earlier this year, she was knocked out at Wimbledon in a first singles match. However, she has now set her eyes on the US Open in what could prove her farewell tournament. She has been ranked singles world number 1 by the Women's Tennis Association WTA for 319 weeks, including a joint record 186 consecutive weeks. She also finished as the year-end number 1 5 times. Serena has won 23 Grand Slam singles title, the most by any player in the Open era and the second most of all time, only behind Margaret Court's 24.
Now let us take a look at the major developments around the world as reported in the foreign press. The Guardian writes, global heating has caused shocking changes in forests across the Americas, studies find. South China Morning Post says UK summons Chinese envoy over aggressive behavior towards Taiwan. The Japan Times reports Russia launches Iranian satellite amid Ukraine war concerns. And now a quick look at the headlines once again. Prime Minister Narendra Modi reshapes country's foreign policy that has national interest at its core, says External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar. India calls for a united, coordinated and unified response to international terrorism. Election Commission to host a virtual meet of the Asian Regional Forum in New Delhi on Thursday. Bangladesh wants developing countries from taking loans through the Belt and Road Initiative of China. Donald Trump appears for questioning under oath on Wednesday in the New York Attorney General's long-running civil air investigation. Russia successfully launched an Iranian satellite into orbit amid U.S. concerns over its planned purpose. U.S. President Joe Biden endorses Finland and Sweden's accession to Nato. And in Kenya, preliminary results from presidential election shows a tight race between the two main candidates. And 23 times Grand Slam champion Serena Williams announces retirement from professional tennis. And now before we end, let us listen to Mahatma Gandhi's favorite bhajan Vaishnav Jan by artists from Ecuador on their Independence Day. And with that, we end this bulletin. We'll be back at the same time tomorrow with the next edition of World News.